What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Out of the Basement. I'm Nate, joined with Justin.
What's up, guys?
And today we are going to be discussing The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 4. This one is called The Siege. Just like our previous episodes of our Mandalorian reviews, this is a full spoiler review. We're not holding anything back. If you haven't seen it by now, what are you doing watching this video? So after a banger of an episode last week, with Bo-Katan making her live-action appearance, we predicted pretty accurately that this episode was not going to have any sort of Ahsoka Tano action going on.
They're going to tease Ahsoka in the last episode. We're going to have another episode where we have to go on an adventure, and then we're going to see Ahsoka.
Right, because the name of the next episode's already come out. And I don't know if you saw it. I don't want to say it here, because that could potentially spoil it for some people.
Whoa.
But I'm thinking next episode is when we get to see Ahsoka. But anyways, let's talk about this episode. So we see the Mando return to Navarro, and characters from Season 1 reappear. We get to see Greef Karga yet again, and then, of course, Cara Dune as well. We also see some other characters like the Imperial Scientist, and, of course, Moff Gideon finally shows up yet again.
And Mithril.
Yes, Mithril, whose name is not Mithril, that's the name of the species, but they're just going to call him by his species name.
Which they've done that twice now.
Yeah.
Because they called the marshal in episode 1 calls the Weequay bartender. He just calls him Weequay.
Right.
He's like, Weequay, get us 2 snorts of spotchka.
Just like, I like how in the first episode it's like established that those two have known each other for a long time, and the marshal's just never bothered to learn his name.
Yeah,
he just calls him Weequay the whole time.
Because Weequay is the species.
Right.
Like Hondo is a Weequay.
Right.
So kind of a weird thing they're doing this season.
Yeah, they're just like, we're not going to name any characters.
It's like, hey, Ewok, come here.
I was going to say, hey, Jawa, come here, but they do that all the time.
True.
So, we start the episode off.
Yeah, Mando has not lightened up on removing his helmet. He won't even remove his helmet in front of the child. He's just like tilting it up to sip on his drink.
Although I do think that shows some character progression, though, that at least on screen with us as the viewer, you know, we're seeing a little bit more. So maybe this is like the start.
Well, he has to eat.
Well, right, but we've never seen it on screen yet. But now, after his interaction with Bo-Katan, now we're seeing it on screen with him lifting up the helmet. So maybe that's a way that...
Maybe, but I feel like he's always had to do that to some degree.
Well, of course.
To eat.
Of
course. Just so happen to not see that on camera.
But maybe.
I mean, I do think eventually he'll just have his helmet off.
And if you want to dive into conspiracies, if you guys aren't familiar with our channel, we mostly cover Star Wars action figures. And there's an upcoming Mandalorian action figure that comes with a removable helmet.
True.
So if you want to go down that rabbit hole, maybe that's why we're starting to see some removable helmet Mando action figures. Because they're going to eventually introduce that idea, which I think would be fine. It shows character progression of Mando. Maybe he realizes that, yes, he was indeed part of a brainwashed sect, a cult-like sect of Mandos.
Absolutely.
But when we get back to Navarro, everything's all hunky-dory.
Yeah. This was like borderline comical to me, and it's like, it's almost like a cartoonish, like, I forget the name of that song that's in like the public domain, but that should have been playing in the background, and it's like, they should have ate like cupcakes or something, I feel like everything is perfect.
Right. The kids are skipping down the street.
Yeah, you know, we have education now. We have classrooms.
They've got, you know, sprinklers going on their lawns.
That's what I'm thinking.
There's grass growing in Navarro now.
Fresh cup of coffee in the morning. Get the paper.
Yeah, exactly. And so the Empire has all but been defeated on Navarro, except for a what do they call it?
Base.
A forward base.
Yeah.
But it turns out it's actually a lab where they're doing some experiments that we'll talk about in a little bit.
There's like a classroom. There's conveniently one desk for the child.
Yeah, which every time I think the child can't get any cuter, another episode comes out where he just does way more adorable things, and I'm just like, I'm such a sucker. Like, normally I'd be like, this is so dumb. Like, they're just clearly trying to pander and be like, oh, look at how cute he is, but I can't help but love it. When he uses the Force to get the macaroons from the other kid because he wants one of them so bad, I was like, give him a dang macaroon. He's starving over there. He hasn't eaten in an hour.
Absolutely.
He's a hungry child. And also, it's not Rey, but there is a young female in the classroom with the 3 knots, which I think is just a nod to Rey, because obviously she was on Jakku her whole life, and if she was alive during this period of time in that age range, she'd be like 30-something by the time Force Awakens comes around.
Right.
But it was just there. It was something I noticed, and I was like, oh, it's Rey, and like just
maybe it's just a popular hairstyle in Corellia or like whatever planet she was originally from, since she's a Palpatine.
Yeah.
You know, she was probably born on Coruscant, for all we know.
Right, exactly. And Palpatine delivered her.
Yeah. Palpatine also reproduced and had offspring.
Post-Scars.
Post-Revenge of the Sith.
So we also get reintroduced to Mithril, who is in Greef Karga's servitude. He is serving out basically like a life sentence almost. He says like 350 years worth of punishment that he owes Greef Karga. So they're working together. Navarro's been cleaned up. We get a short scene with some Pundababus trying to raid the armorer's little sect area where she's got her forge. And
foiled by the new Marshal.
Yep. Cara Dune kicking all sorts of ass.
By herself.
Yep.
She doesn't need any backup.
Straight hand-to-hand combat, which makes sense given the actress's background as a mixed martial artist. So I liked that they kind of incorporated some of her real-life traits into her character.
Absolutely.
And I noticed, though, just a side note, there's one quick scene where she uses her legs to kind of spring one of them into the air, and you can just clear as day see the mat she's laying on, like this soft mat that they laid down.
Nice.
And this episode has 2 goofs like that. So there's that, which I noticed, where you just
and then the crew member,
and then there's a crew member later that you could just plain as day see his like half of his body.
Yeah.
I just thought that was funny. I was like, I haven't really noticed any like mess ups like that until this episode. But then of course Mando needs his ship repaired. To repair his ship, Greef Karga's got a new mission for him. They're gonna go raid the Imperial.
How many times has he gotten repairs on on the Razor Crest, man?
I don't know how you do that. Like, just get a new ship. I mean, I know he likes to keep his.
Yeah. And then you knew right away because it lingered on the one alien crewmate.
Yep.
Who was gonna work on the ship?
He does the classic.
Yes. So you already knew he was going to be an Imperial informant right then and there. So
they, of course, are raiding the Imperial forward base, which, like we said, turns out to be an Imperial lab. There's supposed to be a skeleton crew there, but, of course, in typical Mandalorian fashion, there's a million troopers in there.
Why did the Mithril go with them besides comic relief? Was there any other reason for him to go with them?
They had to use his speeder as transportation.
So the Marshal doesn't have her own speeder, and the leader of Navarro doesn't have his own speeder.
I don't know.
Because I think they were pushing it at times. They never went too much, but they were pushing it sometimes with just the humor.
Especially with the elevator gags where he keeps going, "Oh, I'm not going up there," and then Kara's like, "Oh, well, what about the lava flow?" And then he's like, "Oh, gotta go up there."
I'm not doing that. How about I just put you back in carbonate? Oh, okay, I'm coming.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
They kind of made the same joke 3 or 4 times.
Right.
I was like, he's kind of pushing it.
But I liked it every time it was Carl Weathers because I love Carl Weathers.
Nah, that is true.
And he also directed this episode.
Yeah, respect.
Which was awesome. Great job, Carl. So, of course, they find out that it's a lab. We get a little bit more of a hint as to what's going on, why the Empire wants the child so much, what they're using him for.
Yeah, because they essentially infiltrate it and are basically like self-destructing the lab because it's like over this lava pool, so they like turn down the like coolant or like whatever it was to make the base blow up, and they had 10 minutes, and then they like went, these like Imperial officers were started shooting at them, and then the one is like, just destroy it all. Like, they're trying to destroy evidence as to what they're up to.
Yep.
And then they see these like vats of, there's like bodies in there. It looks very similar to that shot from Rise of Skywalker with the Snoke clones.
Definitely a little Snokey. Definitely a little Emperor-y, which I at this point in the timeline, I feel like I'm more so leaning towards this is them trying to clone the Emperor, which is something we've seen in the EU and something that was also sort of hinted at in the campaign of Battlefront 2.
And there is the Inferno Squad insignia in this episode as well.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't catch that. That's awesome.
It's actually at the end with those like mystery troopers on the wall.
Okay.
And so I was sort of thinking that as well, because in the campaign of Battlefront 2, they sort of hint at trying to resurrect the Emperor. And, I mean, obviously, to some degree, he gets resurrected, or at least cloned. And the reason I don't think it's Snoke is because Episode 9, which introduces just so many, like, logic flaws when you look back at things.
Right.
But he says that the Emperor made Snoke, and he also tells Kylo Ren that he was every voice you have ever heard inside his head. So that means that the Emperor essentially was Snoke. Mm-hmm. So I think the Emperor's resurrection comes first, and then Snoke. But then he's also just still the Emperor.
Right. I don't know.
So, and I would kind of like the Mandalorian to just kind of do their own thing and do the Emperor thing, because now we're like genuinely starting to see the negative effects. And I was talking about this earlier, how like we're gonna start seeing the negative effects of the sequel trilogy's logic and just overall plot and story, and how it is going to negatively affect other like, you know, Star Wars universe properties, because now the Mandalorian series has to abide by the continuity of the sequel trilogy.
Unless you believe the rumors.
Oh, with the...
with what, the thing from Rebels? I haven't quite made it.
They're going to go back in time and change things, which I don't think they'll do.
No, not at all.
It kind of does suck that... I kind of wish The Mandalorian was the continuation of Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the sequel trilogy, because like I said, they have to abide by that continuity. Like, it has to somehow lead into the First Order and Snoke and like all that crap. But I was still very interested, because this to me makes sense that they would be trying to resurrect the Emperor or clone him to some degree. And of course, we get the first Disney Star Wars' first mention of midi-chlorians from the Phantom Menace.
They don't say it.
Yeah, they say M-count, which I think was subtle and nice. I enjoyed that phrase usage.
It's just funny to me that all these years later, midi-chlorian is still such a dirty word in the Star Wars universe.
Which it essentially just means force sensitive, and they can tell if you're going to be force sensitive by your blood, essentially.
Which I feel like, I mean, obviously Star Wars is not realistic, but it could be a realistic thing. Like, you could gauge someone's force sensitivity from when they were born. And they also talk about that. They introduced the idea of injecting force-sensitive blood into non-force-sensitive beings.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, because maybe it's not like an Emperor thing. It could be they're just trying to make like force-sensitive troopers.
Yeah,
of some kind.
Which I believe is something you see in Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast.
Yeah.
Force-sensitive troopers that actually have lightsabers.
Yeah, but we kind of finally get that confirmed. And we've always kind of known that's why they wanted the child.
Right.
It's because the child was force sensitive and they're, to some capacity, trying to get his life force into something else, most likely the Emperor. But now we finally have that confirmation with the doctor from the first season when he's talking about, like, getting the blood from the asset.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's what they want with the child. They want his blood.
Yes. So who do you think the donor is? Or the volunteer, I mean. The donor is obviously the child.
Yeah, the donor being the child. The volunteer, I mean, it's probably just any old Imperial. Because now they're, like, fanatical.
Right.
Now. They're, like, fanatically loyal to the Empire.
I mean,
but that is interesting.
Yeah. I wonder if it is going to be some character we know, though. What if it's Maul again? He's still not dead. And now helps the Empire again. No, he wouldn't do that. No. That would never happen. So then, of course, there's an epic shootout. Yeah. Tons of stormtroopers. They escape.
They escape on, like, that vehicle from Rebels.
Yeah, the troop transport.
The hover that hovers, and they fly it off that thing. That was a great sequence. It kind of just reminded me of, like, classic Star Wars, like an episode of Clone Wars, or perhaps Rebels because it's Imperial. But the scout, I like the shot of the biker scouts all going down like they think they're so badass, yeah. And then two of them end up colliding. Like, oh shit, maybe that wasn't a good idea to do exactly what they just did. But I still thought that was really cool, and it kind of shows like one of the biker scouts was like badass. He was like, he jumped off his bike and was like climbing on top of the thing. He was about to like throw a bomb in there. I was about to, like, is the Empire about to win right now? I'm like, oh my goodness.
He literally gets obliterated though. Yeah. Grief shoots.
Short-lived.
Yeah, Grief shoots him close range with one of the cannons on the transport. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was almost feeling like, what if they use Grief Karga or Mithril or Cara Dune and they like kill one of them or put them in like some peril so that like Mando, has to have a moment where Moff Gideon will be like, you have to give up the child or I'll kill your friends.
All right.
Something like that. Put them in peril somehow. I don't know if that would happen, but
the biker scouts don't work, and then we get some classic TIE fighter action. Yep. And I loved being in the cockpit with the original TIE pilots again. I love the sound when they're in the cockpits just flying. Mm-hmm. And it's one of my favorite like armor designs, like helmet designs in all of Star Wars is the TIE pilot.
I liked the new updated one where it had like the gray on the fin but also had like the gray running down down the face.
Yeah, that was great.
Good friend of the channel, Jeremy, Jedi Hunter 83, was suspecting that we'll see this figure in the Black Series line, which I could totally see. It'd be a super easy repaint. Yep. Slap that Mandalorian logo on it. It'll sell. Yeah. And then, of course, things are looking pretty grim for the crew, but out of nowhere, the Razor Crest saves the day. It's already fully repaired, working perfect condition.
It was alright.
I was like, that was a little fast. Because
how long were they, like, doing all that?
Right. Maybe a couple hours at the most.
Right.
They were over at the Imperial lab, but they fully repaired, and Mando was able to go grab the child, get in the Razor Crest, fly all the way back to where they were, be able to surprise them. I mean, of course, it's a TV show moment. It's a movie moment.
Right.
Logically thinking like that, obviously, it doesn't apply to that situation. It's just supposed to be a triumphant, heroic moment. You get the Mando music. Of
course.
Yeah, and
I think that might be like, oh, everything's happy, just wait until next episode, or something like that, where it's like a false sense of security.
And all the characters are doing their woohoos and whooping, and I was surprised we didn't get that's one hell of a pilot.
Yeah, because they did reference oh, all right, men, load your weapons.
Yeah.
I thought that was like a callback from the Sand Troopers in the original film.
Mm-hmm.
I just, like a very light, like, trooper reference.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We get some cool dogfighting shots with the Razor Crest, though.
Yeah. And of course...
Yeah.
The child is adorable.
And he barfs.
With his putting his hands up like he's having the time of his life, and then he throws up. I was like that's just another thing. I'm just like, God, it's so cute.
Just wait until the child Black Series figure with a little bit of barf on him.
Target exclusive.
Oh.
Just like Green Slime Mando, Walmart exclusive, and Snow Mando, Amazon exclusive.
But then we get my favorite shot of the episode.
It was so good.
And it was mimicking the original opening shot from Star Wars 1977, where you get that underbelly shot of, this time it's not an Imperial Star Destroyer, it is an Imperial Light Cruiser from, I think, like, they were introduced in Rebels?
I've seen them
because they've, with
the
Rebels three engines, but they're usually, like, accompanying bigger ships. So I kind of like that, the Empire's just on the last, they're on their last leg there, and they just have one light. But he did say fleet. So
that's what and
who knows?
This scene at first, I was like, here comes Thrawn. Like,
I was thinking that as well.
I like when the obvious traitor, who's obviously a traitor, is reporting to the female Imperial officer. I totally thought she was going to be like, I'll alert the Grand Admiral.
And then you start hearing organ music.
Yep. And then here's what happens. The shot is zooming in. Thrawn back to the camera. You can just see his jet black hair, maybe a little bit of the blue skin.
Right.
And it keeps panning in closer and closer until eventually you get the head tilt. And you just see
the red eye.
Half the face and the red eye.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
I'm
calling it now.
I feel like we're locking that in at some point in The Mandalorian. I don't know what season, but that exact shot. Some situation where it's like there's a shadow and you can only see like half of his face. Like something to that degree.
Yeah.
Where you'll see the red eye at the very end. And then it'll go...
Because, like... As long as Dave Filoni is involved, he's a very intelligent man, especially when it comes to Star Wars. He sets things up in other shows that pay off. Sets things up in Clone Wars that pay off in Rebels. So I would 100% believe that he would obviously set up the ambiguous ending of Rebels to continue that somewhere else, which could very easily be in The Mandalorian.
Right. And, like... Why would you make the ending to Rebels so ambiguous?
Right. And obviously, Moff Gideon is a high-ranking member of the Imperial Army, but Moff is not the highest rank, of course. And it's more of like a political position.
It's like a governorship position.
And so I don't think it would be terribly unrealistic if, we saw the Imperial Light Cruiser.
Yes. It has another name as well. It's like also known as something else,
but I wouldn't be surprised if obviously that one ship was there. And then of course we got the big Super Star Destroyer that is helmed by Thrawn.
Yeah, or something to that degree.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that shot of the Imperial Light Cruiser was so awesome. It looked like a model, just like the original.
Yeah.
And that was just fantastic to see. And then we get, the door opens and it's Moff Gideon, and we get to see him in live action for the first time this one because we only ever seen him in hologram so far during this season. And he's like, this time, it's almost like Grand Moff Tarkin, like, is the tracking beacon aboard their ship?
Right.
So the tracking beacon is aboard the Razor Crest, and Moff Gideon, I forget what he says, he's like, we'll be ready for them. And then it's so ambiguous because it doesn't even really tease. It's just in the background of these various shots.
And
it's like these black and maybe red
super death troopers.
Like these troops or droids.
And especially if you're watching The Mandalorian on a 4K TV with HDR, it's even harder to see what's going on. Like I was like, I was like, at first I was like, are those Death Troopers? But then I was like, no, they definitely aren't.
They have like some mechanical like.
Yeah, so I was thinking Imperial Sentry Droid because I'm actually watching Rebels for the first time all the way through. I'm in the middle of season 3, and I just recently watched an episode where the Imperial Sentry Droids show up. Mm-hmm. And I was like, they kind of look like a live action updated version of that.
My first thought was like the OG Dark Trooper,
right, from like Star Wars Dark Forces.
Mm-hmm. That look like, I don't even know how to describe it. They're almost like droids,
right? Which I wouldn't
like mechanical.
I would
something
not be surprised if that's what they end up being. Obviously, there's a whole lot of like old school EU stuff going on now, especially in this episode.
Right.
So
or perhaps like a shadow trooper, like a canonized version of a shadow trooper.
Right. Something. I'm excited to see what they end up being.
Purge troopers, Inquisitors,
something.
Inferno Squad?
Yeah, you said the Inferno Squad logo was there.
Yeah, I mean, the Inferno Squad logo is also super vague. It's like 3 red lines. True. So like maybe that wasn't the Inferno Squad, but I've seen like other people commenting that it was the Inferno Squad logo. So I don't know.
Who knows?
I'm super excited for it. I mean, I loved this episode despite some very mild criticisms. I loved this episode. I think it might be my favorite one of this season.
Wow. Over at last episode.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Might be. The Imperial side of this story just has me so interested because we have always, since we grew up, we always wondered what happens after episode 6. Right. Like, we've always wondered that. And there's been books. There are canon films. And I'm still wondering because I just... This is more immediate after Return of the Jedi. It's 5 years, and I've always wondered, like, did the Empire just quit after the second Death Star? Like, ever since we were children, we've always wanted to know what was the Empire up to after Return of the Jedi, and now I just feel like they are laying the groundwork to answer that question in some super satisfying way. And so I'm so interested on like the Empire story here in The Mandalorian. Like the main story.
Right. And luckily, we've got 30-ish years of Star Wars timeline to play with so that we could kind of get something a little bit more set. I know there's sequel trilogy fans out there, and I know...
More power to you.
You like what you like. Don't let our opinions sway you one way or the other. But... I just like that we could get something that's at least a little bit more interesting to me, especially like you were saying, the immediate after effects of Return of the Jedi, and not 30 years later where literally, obviously, anything could happen.
Yeah, because we also don't know how old the First Order is in The Force Awakens. We don't know how new or old it is. So I don't know where in the timeline the First Order rises.
Right.
So I like this a lot more.
Bottom line, this is much more satisfying than the sequel trilogy so far. So I guess final thoughts, final score. What would you give this episode out of 10?
I'm gonna maintain my grade from last week to this week, and I'm gonna say a 9 because it wasn't perfect.
Okay.
I don't think there's been a perfect episode this season.
Agreed.
I think I might have liked it a tad bit more. Like, a teeny tiny bit. Because regardless of a beloved character coming back, it was just another side quest mission.
Yeah. But...
This had more lore, I feel like, aside from Bo-Katan and the whole Children of the Watch thing. I just think this had more to do with the overall story. What would you give this episode, Nate?
So I'm going to go a notch lower than you. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Whoa.
Still a good episode.
Whoa.
Still loved it, but I think episode 3 was just a little bit more satisfying. Although I do agree with you that from a story aspect and a lore aspect, this episode is better.
Okay.
But
Okay.
episode 3 to me has a combination of great action and some pretty solid lore.
Okay.
And of course, what do you guys think of this episode? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed our spoiler discussion, don't forget to leave a like on this video. Subscribe if you are new. We're always talking about Star Wars here on the channel. Maybe starting next year, we cover
all the movies?
The movies. Who knows? No, we gotta do them all. We gotta do them all.
Alright. So you want to sit through Last Jedi again?
I'll do it. I will do it.
Alright.
Listen, Rise of Skywalker is that movie for me that I have trouble
I
sitting
think they
through.
both are.
Of course, don't forget to ring that bell so you know when we are uploading. Of course, I'm Nate. I've been joined with Justin.
See you guys later.
Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys next time on Out of the Basement.